All right, so we're going to answer this multiple choice question before us, and this is going to be an interesting one because this is a tricky question. Now, in methods, you're going to encounter tricky multiple choice questions. And what you need to remember is that on average, you should be spending 1.5 minutes per mark. So if you're spending more than 1.5 minutes on a mark, it probably means that you're taking too long and perhaps you need to skip it and come back to it. If you're spending more than 2 minutes on one mark, you need to say, I don't think I'm going to get it. I'll come back to it later. Do not sit there and waste time because most likely if you can't get it within 1 to 2 minutes, you're not going to get it. So have a guess, put an asterisk around it, and if you have time at the end, then come back to it. And you should be able to identify that it's a tricky question just by reading it. It's something that perhaps hasn't come up that often in the course. Those things are going to come up in methods. Methods is a challenging subject. So you have to get used to, oh, I'm not getting this. Put an asterisk, come back to it. There's plenty you can do within the test. Do not burn time on questions that you're struggling with. Okay, so having said all that now, let's give this a read. It says that the graph y is equal to 1 on x squared is translated 5 units in the positive x direction, then reflected in the x-axis, then dilated by a factor of 1 on 3 from the x-axis, then translated 3 units in the negative x direction. The equation of the resulting graph is which of the following? You can see why this is difficult. The reason why it's difficult is because this question isn't following our usual dilation, reflection, translation. Rather, we have a translation, then a reflection, then a dilation, then another translation. That's what makes this tricky. So we need to think, oh, well, how am I going to go about it? So let's see how we go. We know that we're beginning with this. Y is equal to 1 on x squared. The first thing that we're going to do to it is translate it 5 units in the positive x direction. So that means what we're going to end up with is x minus 5 squared, because that's what it means to move it 5 units in the positive x direction. We replace the x with x minus 5. Then it's reflected in the x-axis. Well, to do that, I just put a negative in front of the entire thing. So there's no real need to change anything there. Except for the negative, I don't have to rewrite the whole thing, I mean. And then it says, then dilated by a factor of 1/3 from the x-axis. Now, if you're dilating from the x-axis, what you do is you just take whatever that dilation factor is and times it to the whole thing. That means what we're going to end up with here is y is equal to negative 1 on 3x minus 5 squared. And then we need to translate 3 units in the negative x direction. All right, if I'm translating in the negative x direction, what does that mean? That means, and this is the important part, people mess this up. It means I'm replacing the x here with 3 units in the negative x direction. So that means I'm replacing the x with x plus 3. And then I'm minusing 5. Then I'm squaring it. So again, just to repeat, what I'm doing there is because I'm going 3 units in the negative x direction, I'm replacing my x with x plus 3. So that means what I'm going to end up with now is y is equal to negative 1 on 3 here. This is going to become x minus 2 squared. We come up and we see which of those looks like our correct answer there. And it looks like negative 1, 3, x minus 2 squared is going to be C. So that's how you would approach that question there. Now, you might find this one pretty tricky. And maybe it's a good one to have a guess and come back to later. You can see how people could burn a lot of time on this question, so don't be one of those people. Now, before we move on, there is another way to answer this question. We answered this by inspection just then, but you could also answer it by the method. So let's go through how to do that as well. This is going to be a bit more involved. So we're starting with a point and we're going to a new point, x dash y dash. So what is x dash y dash going to be? Well, we're told that the first thing we do is translate 5 units in the positive x direction. So that means I'm going to get x plus 5 and then y. And that should be a dash there as well. And then reflected in the x-axis. That means I put a negative in front of the y. Then dilated by a factor of 1/3 from the x-axis. So let me now rewrite this again. That means I'm going to times my y by 1/3. And then translated 3 units in the negative x direction. Translated 3 units in the negative x direction. So that means I've got x plus 5 already, but now I'm going to minus 3 from that. Then I'm going to get negative 1 on 3y. Okay, That means what I'm ending up with here is that my x dash is going to be equal to x plus 5 minus 3, which is the same as x plus 2, and my y dash is going to be equal to negative 1/3 y. You now solve for x and y. So that means I'm going to end up with, now if I just go x dash minus 2 is equal to x, and then on this side, I'm going to end up with negative 3y dash is equal to y. Now I sub that in. So remember my original was y is equal to 1 on x squared. Into my y spot, I put in negative 3y dash, and into my x spot, I put in x dash minus 2 squared. I then, after I've done that, I need to get rid of this negative 3. So that means what I'm going to do is I'm going to times both sides by negative 1/3. Okay? And by doing that, this 3 goes away with this 3. And what I'm going to be ending up with here is y is equal to negative 1 on this 3 will times with the denominator, 3x dash minus 2 squared. And that is the same as that. As you can see, I think doing it by inspection is always a lot quicker, but I do know that many people find doing it by the method just to be a more secure way of doing it. Either way, you get your answer, but you can take note of how much time people could burn on this question. You need to be aware of how long you're spending on multiple choice questions. So if you're spending too long, leave it, come back to it. Okay, hopefully you found this helpful. I'll see you later.